It was a small thing, just a sharp chime cutting through the quiet hum of the ceiling fan. But for Anita, it was the loudest sound in her house that day. Maybe even that week. She paused, tea in hand, her satin robe brushing her knees. The smell of jasmine from her garden barely made it inside anymore. Windows stayed shut these days. The world outside felt too young, too loud, too far away. She placed the cup down and walked to the door, not out of curiosity, but out of habit. When you live alone for too long, routine becomes religion. The peephole was useless, blurred, probably hadn't been wiped in years. She opened the door, halfway, and there he was. Not the usual guy, not the balding, hurried man with sunburned skin and tired eyes. No, this was someone new. Young, broad-shouldered, hoodie slightly damp from the morning mist. A sharp jawline that looked like it belonged in a cologne ad. And eyes, not the wandering kind, but deep, still ones, unapologetic. Held a small brown box in both hands. No smile, no scripted, "Ma'am, your package." Just a look that lingered for half a second, too long. Anita felt her throat tighten. Not out of fear, out of something unfamiliar. Something she had buried years ago under piles of folded laundry and unspoken disappointment. "Yes?" she said, suddenly aware of the soft gap between her robe buttons. He blinked. A flicker of awareness passed over his face. "Package for Malhotra?" "That's me," she replied, quickly tightening the robe at her waist. He handed it over. No clipboard, no signature. Just the brush of his fingers against hers. A chill ran through her arm. "Thanks," she said softly. He turned, paused, then glanced over his shoulder, lips parting slightly like he was about to say something, but DID in single quotes, T. And then he walked away. She watched him through the lace curtains as he disappeared into the fog. Every step he took made her heart thump louder. Not because of him, not just him, but because she was still capable of feeling. This way, she hadn't told anyone this, not even herself, but ever since her husband left 3 years ago, silence had become a cruel roommate. The house echoed differently when you were alone. Every clink of a spoon, every sigh, even the way she closed the fridge, had become softer, as if trying not to disturb ghosts that once lived here with her. The package sat on the table. She didn't even remember what she had ordered. Instead, she replayed the moment, the way his eyes didn't flinch, the way he didn't smirk, like young men often do when they spot a woman over 40 in a bathrobe. He looked at her like she wasn't invisible, and that was dangerous. Not the second time he came. It was a Tuesday. This time she was ready. She wore a deep navy sweater, slightly off shoulder, hair brushed, light gloss on her lips, just enough to look like an accident. She hadn't worn color in months. Today she felt something stir. The doorbell again, 11:15 this time. She opened it slowly. The same hoodie, the same calm eyes, a parcel. Larger this time, twice in 1 week, she said, hoping her voice sounded playful and not desperate. He cracked the faintest smile. "Guess. Someone's been shopping." Her cheeks flushed. He looked past her, just a glance into the house, a quick scan. Then his eyes were back on hers. "Need help with this one?" he asked, tilting the box slightly in her direction. Her mind screamed, "Say no. Keep distance. Don't do this." But her loneliness whispered louder, "Say yes." He stepped inside. The house suddenly felt smaller. Or warmer, or both. He placed the box gently on the marble counter. "Nice place." "Too quiet," she replied. Without thinking, he turned. Looked at her again, that pause again, like he was calculating how far he could go with just a look. "You live alone?" he asked, a dangerous question. She nodded slowly. He said nothing, just looked at her. Not her clothes, not her curves, her. And that was worse. because she hadn't been seen in years. Not like this. Not with curiosity. Not with caution. Not like she mattered. The silence stretched between them like a silk thread. Delicate, tense, waiting to snap. Then he took a step forward, and she didn't move back. Part 2. The second step was hers. His shoes were still wet. They left 2 dark prints on her marble floor, like proof that he'd really stepped into her quiet little world. Anita leaned against the edge of the kitchen island, arms crossed, not to be guarded, but to hold herself together. He stood just 2 feet away now, eyes moving slowly, not hungrily, just patiently. "Do you want some tea?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Too soft. He smiled, a real one this time. "Only if you're making it for yourself." She turned without replying, but her lips curved slightly. She knew what he was doing. That was the worst part. Or maybe the best. She poured water into the kettle with trembling hands. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was thick. It was alive. Every second ticked like a question. How far will this go? As the kettle hissed, she reached for 2 cups and said over her shoulder, "What's your name?" "Ryan." "Not Ray, not Ryan. Ryan. You like the way it rolled. New, sharp. Anita," she replied as if it wasn't written on every package. He delivered. "I know," he said. She turned to face him again, holding both cups. He was closer now. She hadn't heard his steps. He took 1 cup gently, fingers grazing hers, not like before. This time, he didn't let go right away. Their eyes locked. And she felt it again, that impossible feeling she'd buried. Desire. Without explanation, she stepped back. "I don't usually let strangers in," she said, almost to herself. "I don't usually stay," he replied, his voice low. "But you didn't feel like a stranger." They sat at the small table near the window, the one no one had sat across from her in over 2 years. Not since her divorce. Not since her life became echoes and cold spoons. She wanted to ask his age. She didn't. She wanted to mention her ex-husband. She didn't. She wanted to tell him how long it had been since someone made her laugh. She didn't. Instead, she asked, "What else do you do?" "I study," he said. "Marketing? College?" He nodded. 3rd year. She inhaled sharply, covering it with a sip of tea. He was young enough to call her ma'am. Old enough to know better, but neither of them said it. Half an hour passed, maybe more. He stood. Slowly. "I should go," he said. She nodded, not wanting. Him to Dot at the door. He hesitated. "Do you usually order things this often?" She raised an eyebrow. "You keeping track?" He leaned slightly, his eyes darker now, like dusk in a forest. "Only yours," her breath caught. Not from shock. From the way her body reacted to that line, without permission. He opened the door, but before stepping out, he added, "I'll be around again, if there's another delivery." She smirked, half in surrender. "There will be." And then he was gone. That night, Anita stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. She studied her neckline, the softness of her jaw. The places time had touched. She found herself wondering how he saw her. Was she a curiosity? A dare? Or something else? She should have felt guilty. She didn't. Instead, she felt awaked up a 3rd time. It rained. Hard. He was soaked when she opened the door, hoodie clinging to his chest, his hair dripping onto his collar. "Delivery," he said, holding out the package. She didn't even look at it. "Come inside. You'll catch a cold." He obeyed without hesitation. She handed him a towel, and he wiped his face, then looked at her, that look again. But this time, it carried something different. Permission. She watched the drops roll down his jawline. The towel sat limp in his hands. His breath was heavier now. He wasn't pretending anymore, and neither was she. She moved first. Not bold. Not desperate. Just 1 slow step forward. And in that moment, the kitchen didn't exist. The years didn't exist. The gap. The questions, the danger, none of it mattered, Dot. He leaned in, not with force, but gravity, Dot. And when their lips finally brushed, it wasn't heat or hunger that followed. It was relief, like something both of them had been holding back for far. Too long had finally been allowed to breathe, but just as quickly as it began, she pulled away. Guilt flashed in her chest, cold and sharp. This shouldn't, she whispered, eyes fluttering shut. Ram looked at her like he understood, like he felt it too, Dot, but then he said something she didn't expect. Then why does it feel like we already did? And that, Janny, was the moment she knew this wasn't just a fling. This was going to cost her something. Part 3. The kiss that couldn't stay the next morning. Anita stood by the same window where she used to sip tea in silence. But this time, the silence was different, Dot. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of moments that refused to fade. Full of sensations that still danced at the edges of her skin. His breath on her collarbone. The weight of his hand on her waist, Dot, the kiss, Dot. It was real. It happened, Dot, and now it was echoing inside her like an unfinished song. She didn't sleep much that night, not because of shame. Because of clarity. This was dangerous. Not in the dramatic way, but in the quiet way. The kind that sneaks in, undoes your layers, and makes you believe you're still 27 and the world is still yours. But Anita wasn't 27, she was 44. With stretch marks, she no longer apologized for Dot with mornings that started with multivitamins. Not Lamos as Dot, with memories of a failed marriage that still left shadows in her hallways. She stared at the unopened package from yesterday. She didn't even know what was inside. She had stopped needing things, Dot, but now she needed him. Or did she? Days passed. No new delivery. No knock. No message. Just absence she didn't want to chase. She didn't want to become that version of herself, needy, desperate, foolish. But every time the wind brushed the curtain or a bike passed on the street, her heart leapt in betrayal. He wasn't coming back, and maybe that was better. 1 week later, the small envelope arrived. No package. Just a handwritten card. No deliveries this time. Just a thank you. You reminded me that connection doesn't always have an age limit, Dot, but maybe it has a time limit. Ran. She stared at the note until the ink blurred with tears. There was no number. No request to meet again. Just a polite goodbye dressed in wisdom far too mature for his age. He had stepped in, stirred everything, and stepped out with grace. That hurt more than if he'd stayed and ruined it. That evening, Anita lit a candle in the bedroom. Not for anyone else. Just for herself. She wore the navy sweater again, let her hair down, and looked in the mirror, not to impress, but to remember, because what Rand gave her wasn't just a kiss, Dot, it was proof that she was still visible, still desired, still alive, Dot, not for others, for herself. She smiled, a real one, and whispered to her reflection, I can still feel. Epilogue. 1 month later, Anita walked into a bookstore cafe on a lazy Sunday. She didn't need books. She needed air and maybe a croissant, Dot, as she waited in line. Someone behind her said, Excuse me, I think you dropped this. Turned, and it wasn't R-E-Y-N, Dot. It was someone older. Maybe her age, gentle eyes. A kind smile. He held out her scarf. She took it, nodded, and turned back. Then stopped, because this time, she didn't feel invisible, Dot. She felt Dot. Open, Dot. The story wasn't R-E-Y-N, Dot. It was the rediscovery of her own heartbeat. And Johnny, sometimes, that's the most forbidden thing of all. Falling in love with yourself after forgetting how.